Love it. Hey, this is Russ and Ryan here from AMS, and we're thrilled to have Rabea here in the studio with us today. He's going to walk us through his favorite features on the new Victory Kraken VX Mark II amp, which, as we heard in the intro, sounds...
You made that sound really cool as well, the way you said VX Mark II.
I have that talent, really.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Well, you go back to Mark I.
Yes,
right?
I do.
All right, so Mark I, Mark II, I know we'll dive into that, but let's even start about a little earlier. So
yeah, well, we were chatting about this last night out for dinner. Like, I remember it was November 2014 when I got asked to get involved with Victory and do a metal modded version of the V30. So yeah, I guess like the initial idea with the Kraken was a high gain lunchbox head, 2-channel, and I really wanted to incorporate two of my favorite amps and sounds, which, as I mentioned in another video we just did about Carnival, I really liked their tones and that kind of thing. And it was a combination of like a Marshall amp and a PV amp. So we had the JCM 900 style and there was a 5150, and those two I used to use all the time, blend them in stereo.
Yep.
And you know, I could use my volume pot and get super chimey cleans, and as I turned it up, it just got really intense, like thick high gain, because the JCM 900 is quite a thick sounding gain.
Yep.
And then 5150, as everyone knows, is
take your head off.
Yeah,
it really will.
So it was a really nice combo of the two. So that was the kind of inspiration for the Kraken, and obviously Martin being
the genius,
an amazing amp designer, he sort of got where I was coming from and started working on his own designs, and then we just started collaborating from then. And since then, I've now been working with them in Victory R&D department on more or less all the amps that have come out. Like, there's a couple that I haven't been involved in, but like, yeah, most of them
huge
nowadays.
Fans, obviously.
Yeah. And they're all amazing people.
Yep.
I love working with them.
So how far back does your involvement with kind of getting in a little bit into that inside circle of like the Mark II? When did that?
So the Mark II so the Kraken's kind of always been like my baby with Victory. It's not a signature amp or anything like that, but it's just the thing that I've been most involved in. So there was talks to do the Mark II before the pandemic. Oh, wow. So I remember the first prototype, Martin came down to visit me before the pandemic. It was like, I can't remember if it was like a few months before or whatever, but it was definitely not far before it started.
Yep.
And we heard the first version, and the general premise was, you know, clean channel now, like let's elaborate on what was already a great amp. So we started looking at the clean first, and we heard the one iteration, and then it was a pandemic. So like,
right.
Didn't do
everything
anything
was on pause.
For ages.
Right.
So I'm trying to think, like, it's all a bit of a blur, but I feel like we started reworking the Kraken Mark II last year.
Okay.
I think. Like, Martin would make a modification, come down to visit me, we'd play it for a bunch of hours and talk about what we liked, what we didn't like, what we changed, you know, and then he'd go away and come back again. So that happened like, I want to say like 5 times. So there were 5 different iterations of...
Wow.
And that's post-pandemic. Yep. And I would constantly just change little things here and there. And some of the greatest changes came right at the end. Like,
can you describe that process? Are you in a room and you're just saying, look, I'm going to look the other way, I'm going to just play, and can you tweak it based on my comments, or is it more like I'm going to take this home and really sit with it, or a little bit of both? So
it's it's a little bit of both. Leans more towards being in the room at times. So Martin comes down with the prototype, and it's literally just like the chassis, like all the gubbins are everywhere, and you have to place it really carefully and not touch underneath, or you'll get thrown
Don't
across
stand
the
in
room.
water.
And one of the reasons that I think Martin and I work really well together is like it's like the producer and engineer thing. Mm-hmm. You know how like producers get really passionate, like, it sounds a little bit fizz and a bit of buzz, and it sounds like I want to get a little bit more like, you know, girth out of it, you know, all this kind of stuff.
Wine terminology.
But he gets me when I'm saying all this stuff and can translate that into how we defect the circuit and change it and all that. Because not only is he great with like engineering and wiring and design and stuff, but he's a phenomenal guitar player.
That helps.
So he 100% knows the feel thing
himself firsthand.
Yeah. So he'll give me 20 minutes and he gets his soldering iron out and he like pulls bits off and adds bits and
like
then
a mad scientist.
And then try this out, and then we're like, it's getting closer now. And it was good because we already had the foundation of Mark I there. We didn't want to change anything about both.
It was a proven hit at that point, which is good.
So there wasn't anything we really wanted to change there. We just wanted to build on it.
So can you walk us through like the Mark II
Yeah, 100%.
differences from the Mark I?
So well, firstly, it's got a really nice wooden sleeve, which you can get. Obviously, it comes in the standard metal casing as well, which I like those ones because they're rugged and whatever. Although I did dent my car with it, putting it in the car the other day. Yeah,
That's a great feature. A lot of amps don't do that.
Yeah, because it's got the hard edges, whereas these are padded. In any case,
that was for our viewers.
So in terms of the front panel, first thing that you may notice is we've got smaller chicken head knobs now because there's a bit more going on in the front. But we still have fundamentally 2 channels. So 2 gains, gain 1 and gain 2. As I say, gain 1's based on that British voicing, gain 2's based on more of that American voicing. But we now have a clean channel, which we had on the Super Kraken, but the difference here is that the Super Kraken, the clean and crunch stage was engaging half the preamp tube, whereas on this, we're attenuating the first gain stage to get the clean.
Okay.
And as a result of that, you have a little bit of natural compression. It feels really nice under the fingers we were talking about.
Yeah, that's the best thing. I mean, how an amp compresses it, or lack thereof. Just that feel, the dynamic of it.
Yeah, because you plug into a Fender Twin and any...
Very unforgiving.
Any high gain players are like, nah, it's not
They
for
run
me.
for the hills.
Yeah. So this should feel really nice to those that are maybe not using clean as much and is a gateway clean channel.
That's a good way to put it. Was that what we heard on the intro?
That was the crunch channel.
Was it really?
Yes.
Sounded great clean.
Yeah.
Or semi-clean, I should say.
The thing I like about gain 1 is it's super dynamic. So,
yeah, for sure.
The clean would sound like this. So there's a chime to it, but also we are in low power mode as well. I won't put it in high power mode.
But it's still
loud.
kind of spanky. It's got a nice little...
Is that 9 watts with low power?
Simon?
Hold on. It sounds like 9.
Yeah. Good ears, man.
Thank you.
Do you know what it is?
I think it's 4 or 5.
Okay, good.
That was my second guess.
Yeah. You were close. I mean,
well.
Well, it's 4 plus 5 is 9. So
that's right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really
blew my mind.
So it does go quiet, but it's actually 50 watts or thereabouts on full power, so it's bloody loud.
I'll bet.
Yeah. So that you'll also get a little bit more compression on low gain, on
more
low
squish,
power mode.
yeah.
You do get more squish,
But it's fun.
But the clean channel has a super amount of chime to it. I'm on the bridge pickup. Some delay and reverb.
But that's probably something worth calling out too, because I think there might be, from some folks, a misconception that the Kraken means metal music, means high gain, means just because of that one aspect or whatever of it. But it really wouldn't hold to be true.
I personally believe this is, for me, one of the most versatile amps.
Right.
Because I discovered that with the first Kraken, the first gain, I started playing Strats a lot, like single coil guitars, should say. I always call them Strats, but guitars with single coils.
It's all right.
And found that the Kraken, because it was always plugged in and I always had it plugged into load box or a cab, I would just plug into that to play it.
Yeah.
And found that the first gain stage, for me, channel 1, was just amazing for Strats. You could really get the bluesy spank, or you could gain it up and it would be in a really thick overdrive.
I could even hear country guys liking that.
Yeah.
No joke. I mean, this would be a great Nashville amp. You'd
Yeah.
be covered for any session, it seems like.
Yeah, and I found that to be the case with the first gain, and we were really chuffed with that. So, so adding the clean channel, attenuating that first gain stage, you just get a really nice amount of, and I say this very lightly, it's not compression, it's a tiny, tiny bit of squish that feels natural.
It's tactile. It feels good under your hands. It doesn't feel like each note you play is going to be exposed as a... I always feel naked when I'm playing something that clean.
Yeah, me too.
But when you've got that feel, and the note is going to stop when I stop it.
Yeah.
Not just hit and die.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
addictive.
Going back to what you were saying about the conception of this amp being for metal, obviously that's the idea. That was what it was kind of aimed at originally, and it still kind of is, it's the highest gain amp in the range of all the families and all that kind of stuff. But we're just adding more strings to its bow of versatility by adding that clean channel. I just think it's fantastic for really whatever you want to play.
Right.
If you like the sound of the gain stages in it, if they're to your tastes, then you'll find there isn't really much it can't do now with Mark II. So the clean channel, really comes into its own on high power mode when you've got it turned up. But gain 1 is like the crunchy channel, which can be both like, or if you put it into an in-between position, like it's got that.
Yeah.
Yep.
You can play it. Yeah, so it can go chimey, it's super dynamic. And I usually run it around there for me. So when I go on bridge and do like pick stuff, like I can play dynamically, but then you can dig in as well. But the really cool thing with this is we had some feedback, and this is something else worth saying. We listened to the feedback of a lot of the users as well, which is a good thing to do.
Sometimes.
Yeah. And one of the things that we found was that there was a lot of guys that really, really loved, and girls, that really, really loved the Kraken, but they found that they would only ever move to gain 2 for like lead.
Yeah.
For the high gain lead, if they were doing like
Legato kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But most of them stayed around gain 1, using it for rhythm, and then rolling the volume down for clean. So that's why, firstly, we wanted to put the clean channel in there. But secondly, we were like, well, if people just want to use the first gain stage, they've kind of running into a problem tiny bit, because you've got clean and gain 1 sharing the same, you know.
Tone stack. Yeah.
So if you're turning the gain up to there to play like
There
that
goes your
high gain, then when you move to clean, it's going to be really loud like this.
Yep.
And also, you might like the clean channel with the gain on full for that kind of Malcolm Young kind of like AC/DC
The
thing.
Kerrang, yeah.
But then what happens is when you move to the crunch, it's quieter. Because it's compressing more, obviously, you're adding more gain. So we added, and this was one of the last additions on the back, is a balance pot. In other words, you can balance out the volume difference. I don't know if you ever played like a Soldano SLO, but it's a similar thing where it's just by nature of its design, when you're on the clean and then you move to the crunch, it's like, whoa.
Yeah, it's like, yeah.
So we're trying to combat that with this idea.
So there's more unity here.
Yeah, and the pot on the back is the send level. So you can.
Great feature.
Yeah, and so you really balance it out. So if I give you a kind of demonstrations, that's the crunch, that's the clean on full.
Yeah. It's immediate difference.
Yeah, right. So
How did that realization come to you? Where you're like, man, we gotta come up with something to do that. Did you just kind of?
That's Martin.
Yeah.
He came up with the concept of putting it on a pot. I was like, maybe it could be a switch, but then obviously that negates.
And it's variable. That's nice. That,
Exactly.
That's the beauty of it.
But it was that. It came from, what if players just want to use the first gain stage for most of what they do?
Which a lot of players do.
Yeah. So that was why we did it like that. And then it also, we added with the foot switch, you can control Master 1 and Master 2. So what it allows you to do is basically use it as first gain stage with the clean, with that, and then you can use Master 1 and Master 2 if you just want to stay on the first gain stage. But then you can equally have jumping over to gain 2 for the high gain if you want to. So
I also like what it does for the layout, because there's so much going on there. There's so much versatility, but I'm not intimidated by looking at that amp.
No.
Sometimes you go, well, this amp could do anything, but it's got 5,000 knobs.
Yeah.
Like to me,
Switches.
that's a nice set it and forget it kind of feature to have there to taste.
It's a nice challenge too, because there's not much real estate on it. Like the remit is, it has to be the lunchbox size, so you really have to get creative on how you can add all this to it without, with the Super Kraken, we had much more space to do more stuff. That was another reason why we couldn't do the clean channel concept in here like that.
Got it.
It needs more space to be able to do the whole preamp engage thing. Preamp tuning.
Very clever.
So that's cleaning game 1. Really, really great channel. And then gain 2 is all about gain, So
There's nothing wrong with that, by the way.
all that kind of stuff.
But you hear every note.
Yeah, it's super
There's
rich.
not a lot of blur there,
Yeah.
Wild. Because those were expensive chords. I could hear each little, you know what I mean? Sometimes everything kind of coalesces into
Yeah.
a fuzzy chunk, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you could hear everything
definition.
there. Yeah, it was really cool.
Again, that's something that the 5150 was known for. Like,
Yeah.
and you'd see it in every single studio that played high
That's why
gain
everyone's still
metal.
using it, man.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So, and I found that same joy in using it. So that's why we based it around that was the inspiration. So in terms of what's changed about this particular channel is nothing on the actual gain side, but we added a presence knob now. Because one of the other bits of feedback we had, it's worth saying, Martin and I kind of a love-hate relationship with presence knobs.
Mm-hmm.
I've always found the 5150 to be great, but also way too fizzy for me. So I just turn the presence down.
Dial it out.
And I've found that on a lot of amps, presence, when I turn it up, I just don't really like what it does. So I've just kind of always ignored it. And on Kraken Mark I, we personally felt that it sounded great as is, but some of the feedback was, we'd like to open it up a bit more. It'd be nice if it had a presence knob just for the option, all this kind of stuff. And I would say, in fairness, over the years of exploring other tones and heavy music for myself, it can be useful.
And where it
having
sits in a mix
presence.
sometimes too. It might not be your
Yeah.
main sound,
Yeah.
but as a layering thing, it could really add that dimension that you were probably missing before.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, we'll put a presence knob on the amp. So Martin came up with his own presence design, like presence knob circuit and everything. And I was like, it'd be great if we could have it like it's not affecting anything, like as in the original version of the Kraken. Because there will be people out there that just want it to sound like the original one.
Sure.
Right.
Like me. So I'm happy with it being, so when it's off like this, it's as the
Completely
original Kraken
bypassed.
sounds.
Got it.
And again, with it being in low power mode, you're getting a bit more squelch and also you're hearing more of the sort of high frequencies at lower volume because everything's like, I guess, compressing a bit more, but you get more of that kind of, like there's a nice amount of presence there already. But what's nice about having it all the way down is that that's the base rate that Kraken sounded, but you've got the entire scope of a presence knob now to play with. So
Yeah, you can even hear it there.
Yeah, like. If you
Wow.
want it like that.
It sounded like you were playing through a tweeter or something. Like it kind of added that high
Yeah.
end. It's really there, yeah.
So that's cool. And we were like, yeah, okay, it's got presence now. And I was like, well, it might be cool if we can affect where that is because, the history there is that Martin came with one version and I think we had two versions, or did we have it on a I can't remember, but I remember thinking the presence doesn't necessarily work for this sound, but it works for this sound. Is there any way we can have both? Like, can you move where that is?
You got greedy. You wanted everything.
Yeah, I got greedy. I was like, is there any way we can move where that presence is affecting in the sound of the amp, like a presence shift?
Sure.
So that's what we added. So if you prefer the sound of your presence area differently with other amps, you can do that on this. So, and the best bit for me is that with the presence knob all the way down, sounding like the original Mark I Kraken, if you put the switch in, it just very mildly changes the sound. So if you turn it off for a second, and I just chug real quick. So this is how it originally sounded, no presence on the amp. And now you go, and now you turn it on. Do you hear the difference?
Yeah, it's subtle.
It's subtle, but it's slightly opened it out.
You can't
at the top
unhear
end.
it.
So if you switch it on and off, and it's just slightly
it's very
a bit more of a bite. So I really liked that because it's a very mild increase of presence, but it's not too much for me personally. But what's nice there is that, let's say we turn it up to say here now. And then you
And
press
then
the
hit it.
switch.
Yep.
It's almost a
toggle
little more
back and forth.
hi-fi or something.
Yeah.
Both riffs made me want to punch the table. But yeah, you hear it for sure.
But it's great because people, you can kind of cater to more people in their tastes of high gain.
Sure.
You know, presence is one of those things that seems to be really, really.
The tastes of high gain.
It's the
The
wine.
taste of
The
high
wine.
wine,
Yeah,
yeah.
the wine
I got my sniff.
comparisons.
But people love high gain amps, and they expect presence to be there.
Yeah.
So not only are we giving them that, but it's now on top of that, you've got like multiple options to how you use that presence. And also, for example, like on gain, because presence is affecting the whole amplifier with that shift switch, if you are just using gain 1 and the clean and stuff, you might find that the presence in one position isn't quite working for you, so you use the shift switch and you've just got more options.
Yeah.
More versatility.
It's a good option. It's not adding something that doesn't need to be there.
Yeah.
It is an improvement on what was already a good amp.
Yeah.
And there's an effects loop in the back as well?
Yeah, there's an effects loop. It's the same effects loop. You still have the bass focus switch as well, which was popular because guys that are using extended range,
For sure.
you know, baritones, 9 strings, whatever, when you push that in, it affects the negative feedback of the amp. It just acts like a high-pass filter.
Okay.
It just tightens everything up. So that hasn't changed. It's still the same bass focus it was in.
So you took what you already loved about the initial amp and you said, if it could be improved, let's do it. If it's not worth doing.
Yeah.
And these seem like genuine improvements to me.
Yeah. And
we have lunchbox wood cab, we have lunchbox metal sleeve, and then there's the kind of the full size
that's the Super Kraken.
Super Kraken, which has like
It comes with a
MIDI
thermos
and-
too, I think.
Yeah. that's 100 watts. So it's 2 extra power tubes. It's also worth saying that it's 6L6 in here is what
Yep.
it's shipped with. Whereas the Super Kraken's 100 watts, so 4 6L6. You can fit EL34s in here. There's
Right.
a switch inside. Just switch it over, put them in, rebias, you're
hotter.
done.
But in terms of voicing, they sound the same. It's more headroom, I assume, just with that 100 watt? Or do you feel it's a
honestly,
different animal?
there is a bit of a difference.
Yeah.
Like for me, EL34s are a little more angry sounding.
Agreed.
Like they have that about them. 6L6 is
Pitchy
break
here.
up, yeah.
Yeah.
And 6L6 breaks up a little bit quicker. That I've found, you know. But they've got a little more squish, whereas the EL34s are just a lot more, aggressive.
Yep.
And I love that.
Notes of leather and cassis.
So, but it's nice to have the option. And yeah, so the Super Kraken, the differences between the two are much smaller now, which is great. So you've got a clean on both amps. Then you've got gain 1 and gain 2 on both amps. You don't have presence on Super Kraken, but then again, there's a different size output transformer in it. So it does sound slightly different.
Sure.
And we haven't had as many comments on that. But the other
It's all
thing,
solid state rectifiers or?
that's a Martin question.
Yeah, no, because it's nice and tight. I prefer a solid state
Yeah.
rectifier. I think some people think solid state's a bad word, but in the right area of a good tube amp, it gives you that tighter low end.
I want to say it's not. Because
Okay.
I don't know if Martin really works with solid state like in that respect. I'm not sure.
We
I
could
be
find out
completely
later.
wrong. Is it a solid state rectifier? It is. Okay, it is. Okay, so that shows how much I know.
One for Daisy.
It was a total guess. I apologize.
Yeah, but Super Kraken has a preamp focus, which is a preset TS style boost circuit that we added. So you don't need to have one on the floor. Like you just, and it also has MIDI, which we
Lord.
couldn't fit.
Yeah,
into
that's asking a lot.
Yeah.
Real
guy.
estate on the back, sure.
But that's why we adjusted the functionality of the foot switches so that you've kind of got the most out of it. So you've got everything from like clean and crunch, gain 1 and gain 2. You've got control over both masters, and then a solo override, which just jumps you to gain 2.
So you could literally show up to a gig and be like, all right. I mean, I'll make it through.
Yeah, because you could, maybe you want an overdrive in addition to the amount of gain that's in here.
I can't imagine that.
But other than that, I would just, for me personally, I'd get by with the delay reverb pedals.
There you go.
And you'd be on
And
your way.
I'm good.
Yeah.
And if you use switches, obviously with the two foot switch inputs on the back, most switches have 2 remote outs,
Right.
which is ring and tip times 2. So you can control the whole functionality of the amp with a switcher, whether it's gig rig or ES8 or any of the other ones out there that people use.
I'm sold.
No.
Can I have that one?
I guess.
Simon, can I take that one?
Doesn't work that way.
Never mind.
But I think anyone that plugs into this is going to feel like and they know the Kraken, they're going to feel at home, but also really enjoy the quality of life improvements and the clean channel.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, we appreciate the walkthrough and the demo.
No worries.
It was awesome.
Thank you very much.
Well, for the Victory Kraken VX Mark II head on over to americamusical.com and be sure to like and subscribe for more content like this. Did you want to play us out, Rabea?
I can try. I can try. I'll do some stuff on the
that's a wrap.